So, I wanted to take a moment to talk about why the online right dominates in online media. I think a lot of people have seen the Media Matters infographic that's gone around. I will insert it here. And my friend Liz Neptune actually sent me some videos about people talking about it. And for me, this is not surprising at all. I said this before in my Curtis Yarving and the Overton window video that the right has made good use of using meme culture to infiltrate kind of the ideas that they want to see proliferate in society. I know this is getting a lot of traction now, but I hate to say it that the left is about 10 to 12 years too late on this. I saw this in real time, and I really think the peak really came about during the Charlottesville protests and the fiasco that happened with that. And I'm going to talk about some of the influences I think led up to this flipping in dominance. So, for me, I was an early adopter of podcasts. I'll just stick to podcasts for now. So podcasts classically came from Apple, but now you see them on YouTube, and now it's just an all-encompassing term for like a non-media elite that is talking about their opinion. So I was an early adopter about 2007, and I will say that the left really dominated podcasts in that era, and the dominance only heightened with the introduction of Barack Obama. So Barack Obama is important here because he, as a president, was very professorial. Like, he was a constitutional lawyer. He was a professor at U Chicago. And that really set the tone for how people took him and took media. So with the introduction of Barack Obama, who was very stark contrast to George Bush, into the presidency, you saw an increase in status of professors, these professional managerial class, those people who made it their life's work to study and to understand. And these large media conglomerates like the New York Times, which are known for being very highbrow, those things gained status, and that's where people were looking. The problem happened, though, when it went from okay, we're very professorial, we do all of the research, to almost a condescending kind of tone. And that all of that is pretty like unattractive to the average working class person. So with Obama, you got this highbrow kind of introduction into politics. But like I said, that is great for someone who is educated or who really likes pedagogy. However, a more working class person that is very straight talking, that can be off-putting. And that's where you started to see the right really take advantage, because they didn't have much of a spot in mainstream media at that point. And they kind of went towards podcasts and independent journalism. You saw the Alex Joneses start to really crop up and gave a voice to right-wing sentiments or resentment, however you want to look at it. So another thing that made this switch from left to right as far as media and independent journalism is that the right wingers, they were very good about discussing topics that kind of were déclassé in the left. So things like the dating scene, especially for men. A lot of men did not feel like they could discuss these things in mainstream society because it always got reduced to, well, it's your fault or there's something wrong with you. I'm not here to debate the tenets of that argument, but I'm just saying that you could see how if you're looking for help, it becomes an issue when everything is said to be your fault or it's inappropriate for you to bring up. So a lot of these manosphere podcasts or red pill things, their introduction was to get young guys help on how to talk to women and how to get a girlfriend or get a mate, right? So you start with something that is very humanistic and something that we can all relate to, which is wanting to be loved or wanting to be cared for. And then they start to put in how society has it out for men, especially white men who do not fit a certain class structure. So the right gained these men's trust not by berating them, but actually speaking to a very real issue or resentment that they were dealing with. You can actually see this currently today with Candace Owens, you can actually see that today with Candace Owens, where, yes, she's known for having a very tough demeanor, but the way she's been easing people into listening to her podcast now is that she's been talking about the Blake Lively, Justin Maldoni thing. She's been talking about Macron's wife, things that on their surface are very or absolutely very much are politically neutral. So people kind of get their guard down, and then they start listening and they start listening. And then she gets into like the Zionism and the free speech stuff and the more political stuff. But she's already won your trust by the more neutral things that she talks about. And this gaining of trust kind of softens your senses to what it is that she's talking about. Whereas if someone came out of the gate and said some of the things that she said, you would immediately clock them and say, this is not right. This sounds like conspiracy. This doesn't really align with my values. But because she is talking about things that are of interest to you and kind of soften you, you're more receptive to her messaging. And a lot of the right wing does this. Joe Rogan does this brilliantly. And he also really phrases things under the guise of, hey, I'm just asking questions. I'm just a normal guy, which is actually pretty dangerous when we're talking about mass unaliving denial. You can read between the lines with that with regards to a specific religious group. That is actually a very dangerous thing to say, but it's actually really brilliant when it comes to easing people's senses, because it's like, hey, well, I don't know anything either, and I'm just asking questions too. So we're all just asking questions together. There's no judgment here. Whereas on the left, because we have lean full tilt into academic epistemology and like the pedagogy and learning and research and things like that, it can be very isolating for people who do not have that type of background. It can come off as condescending. It can come off as judgmental. It can come off as thinking people are stupid. And that is why that Hillary Clinton deplorables comment went so poorly, is because there was already this kind of march towards, if you're not educated, if you're not learned, you're kind of on the lower end of society, in addition to the lack of status that we've now given to working class jobs. Then you have this presidential candidate calling people deplorables, which, like I said yesterday, is basically an all-encompassing term for someone that's working class, low status, not the most intelligent or the most learned. So you have that aspect that is also keeping the left down. So it's not a very welcoming place for people that don't have a particular background. In addition to that, or along those same lines, is like this purity testing. So Liz mentioned this in her comment to me, which is like, if you are pro biological definition of sex, not gender, I said sex, that is a purity test that you would fail on the left, and that would be grounds for a cancellation for a lot of people, right? So like, we have these really strict standards for who we want to let in, but the right doesn't have that. And I'll give you an example. So I told you before that I listened to Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon cannot stand Elon Musk. However, at CPAC, Steve Bannon did that Roman salute. Steve Bannon has not expressed any type of Yahtzee sentiments. He has not said anything that I would perceive as anti-Star of David, but he did that to kind of show, hey, I'm willing to be on Musk's side if he's willing to strike up a deal with me. There's no such thing as that on the left, because the left, in my opinion, and I've said this before, is in love with this, what I call narcissistic empathy and narcissistic virtue signaling. They would rather virtue signal and portray this image of themselves that is not even real than they would be willing to actually do something that is helpful or beneficial for their actual cause. In a lot of ways, for the left, the individual is more important than the collective cause, which is ironic because a lot of people on the left would lean more socialist and more inclined towards group upliftment versus individual. But the way they express themselves politically actually lends itself to this kind of toxic individuality, where they would rather virtue signal and sacrifice the group to prove a point about them as a person. So this is just my take on why the right is dominating. To me, it's not a surprise at all. I've watched this over the last at least 10 years. I would even go as far as saying 12, when you saw a lot of people going underground with like the human biodiversity, which is also a catch-all for there are group genetic differences, and that's the reason why certain groups are doing poorly in society. With the red pill manosphere, gender war type of stuff, the political stuff, all of these things, the signs have all been here, but the left, because we've been so wrapped up in our own thing, a lot of us did not see it coming. But it's here, and it's going to be hard to correct. It's because there's a lot of things that you're going to have to let go of to actually win back people's hearts and minds.